people in the West think that there's sort of a deep-seated immoral dimension to my position because I'm blaming the West and not Putin. But I actually think that what's going on here is that the West is leading Ukraine down the primrose path. And the end result is that Ukraine is going to get wrecked. What we're doing is encouraging the Ukrainians to play tough with the Russians. We're encouraging the Ukrainians to think that they will ultimately become part of the West because we will ultimately defeat Putin and we will ultimately get our way. And of course, the Ukrainians are playing along with this. And the Ukrainians are almost completely unwilling to compromise with the Russians and instead want to pursue a hardline policy. Well, as I said to you before, if they do that, the end result is that their country is going to be wrecked. And what we're doing is, in effect, encouraging that outcome.
What happened here is we have led the Ukrainians down the primrose path. We have pushed very hard to encourage the Ukrainians to want to become part of NATO. We have pushed very hard to make them a Western bulwark on Russia's borders, despite the fact the Russians made it clear that this was unacceptable to them. We, in effect, and here I'm talking about the West, we took a stick and we poked the bear in the eye. And that bear is going to tear apart Ukraine. That bear is in the process of tearing apart Ukraine. And again, we go back to where we started. Who bears responsibility for this? Do the Russians bear responsibility for this? I don't think so. The question is, what caused the Russians to do this? And in my opinion, the answer is very simple. The United States of America. Thank you. Conventional wisdom in the United States and in the West more generally is that the Russians are responsible for the war, and I haven't bought it for a long time. In my opinion, the West bears primary responsibility for what is happening today. And it was largely a result of a decision in April 2006 to make Ukraine and to make Georgia a part of NATO. Final point I'd make is if you look at what the Russians are doing militarily in Ukraine at the moment, it does not look like they're bent on conquering the country and occupying it. If you look at what the Russians are doing militarily in Ukraine at the moment, it does not look like they're bent on conquering the country and occupying it.
Wow, he is super dumb.
And indeed, in August of that year, of course, August 2008, you had a war involving the Russians and the Georgians over the whole issue of whether or not Georgia would become part of NATO. Before February 22nd, 2014, nobody was arguing that he was aggressor. Nobody was arguing that NATO expansion was required for the purposes of containing Russia before February 22nd, 2014.
Georgia is in full regime of self-defense against unfounded and totally legitimate aggression from the Russian Federation.
Before February 22nd, 2014, nobody was arguing that he was aggressor. The question is, what caused the Russians to do this? And in my opinion, the answer is very simple. The United States of America. Thank you.
But before we get to our own errors, because I've got to tell you, Jordan, one of the things that I'm very focused on is you need to start by blaming the enemy for things the enemy does. I'm happy to talk about what our responsibilities are here, but this was all Putin's decision.
Because he's not finding allies at that rapid a rate, let's say.
No, he's not finding really allies at all. One of the things that happened, the Biden administration deserves a lot of credit for at least one thing that it's done, actually for a few things that it's done. Deserves some criticism for other things, but for the first time in history that I'm aware of, the Biden administration fought a counter-hybrid warfare campaign back against the Russians. And as the Biden administration became aware of Russian preparations to conduct a coup d'etat in Kyiv, they told the Ukrainians about it, and they told the world about it. As they became aware of multiple Russian preparations to conduct false flag attacks or stage Ukrainian provocations or various other things that would have given Putin informational cover and created a who really knows effect in the minds of people in the West, the Biden administration blew every one of those operations. It's both.
Why
because
both?
we can wage war with the truth because we're not trying to lie. Putin is trying to create a false universe. Putin is trying to create a fictitious universe, and the Biden administration punctured that. I'm calling it hybrid warfare because they reacted to, first of all, Putin engaged in violence, and which makes it, politically motivated violence, which makes it warfare. And his guys were conducting deliberate information campaigns to support specific preparations for military activities.
We took a stick and we poked the bear in the eye. And that bear is going to tear apart Ukraine.
Should Russia attack militarily, Ukraine's over in 2 days. There's just no comparison.
And the Biden administration engaged game for game with them on a very tactical level. So it wasn't just sort of blanket telling the truth. It was finding
strategic as well.
Strategic and tactical, blowing all
and
of this
informed.
cover. Yeah. And you can, by the way, see, I have a little bit artifact that suggests that this was true because Putin held one of his weirdly publicly staged, National Security Council meetings on Monday. And one of the things that happened was he absolutely humiliated the guy who is the head of his foreign intelligence agency that would have been responsible for a lot of these operations. I mean, he humiliated the guy in public in a way that we've never seen him do before. And I think he probably was genuinely angry that the guy had allowed the Biden administration to get inside all of these operations. So frustration and anger in response possibly to the success of the Biden administration sort of defeating all the informational stuff.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting explanation for a tipping point, and certainly not an expected one.
The question is, what caused the Russians to do this? And in my opinion, the answer is very simple. The United States of America. Thank you.
I'm happy to talk about what our responsibilities are here, but before we get to our own errors, because I've got to tell you, Jordan, one of the things that I'm very focused on is you need to start by blaming the enemy for things the enemy does. This was all Putin's decision.